Before we begin our exploration of adverbials, the different types of adverbials and the different functions, let's talk about grammatical necessity. Grammatical necessity is an idea that we're looking at all of the different pieces of a sentence and trying to determine which of those pieces or chunks are necessary to make the sentence, for the core meaning of the sentence. So let's consider some examples to kind of illustrate what we're talking about. So our first sentence, we have a subject, Granny, right? The predicate, saw a gopher in the garden. What did she do? So we have subject, verb, object, and then we have a prepositional phrase, in the garden. That tells me the location of this action. Okay? If I remove the verb, I can immediately see that that verb is necessary for the meaning of the sentence, because now I have a subject, Granny, I have an object, maybe a gopher, or maybe Granny and the gopher are both in the garden, but what is she doing? What is the gopher doing? What are they doing? We don't know. We don't have a verb. So that verb is definitely necessary for the meaning of our sentence. If I remove old Granny and just say saw a gopher in the garden, now we have the verb, but we don't know who saw or what saw. We don't have a subject, so we can see that the subject of a sentence, the subject and the verb, those are very necessary to get across the meaning of the sentence. Okay. If I just say Granny saw, again, okay, I have a subject, I have a verb, so I know she's doing something. But that verb see, right, we really want that to be a transitive verb. See typically takes a direct object. We don't usually use the verb see without a direct object. You've got to see someone, you've got to see something. What did Granny see? So taking out the gopher, taking out the direct object really completely ruins the meaning of the sentence. So that direct object is looking very necessary. But if I keep Granny, the subject, and the verb, and the direct object, now I'm doing pretty good. This Granny saw a gopher, period. That's a full, complete sentence that expresses a complete idea. I do lose the information about the location of the action, but I still have a complete sentence with a complete idea. So we can see that that last example really has all the necessary information. Okay, some more examples. Okay, Deirdre bathed her newborn son. Again, a transitive verb, the subject, verb, a direct object. If I remove the direct object, what happens here to the meaning of the sentence? And when we use the word bathe as an intransitive verb, then really the meaning is that Deirdre bathed herself. And that is different than when we had the direct object and she was bathing her son. So again, that direct object is looking like it's a grammatically necessary element. Okay? Now, if we have Deirdre ate these delicious ramen noodles and I remove the direct object, Deirdre ate, we're missing some information here. We don't know what she ate, but she still ate something. She definitely didn't eat herself. So when we use ate or the verb eat as an intransitive verb, it doesn't give us the same change in meaning as when we use the word bathed as a transitive verb, right? Deirdre bathed means Deirdre bathed herself and not something else. But Deirdre ate, right? We still know that she ate some kind of food. She ate something. We don't know the ramen noodles, but Deirdre ate doesn't have that same shift in meaning as Deirdre bathed. So that direct object ramen noodles seems a little less necessary to complete the meaning than that the newborn son. Bathing the newborn son seems like that direct object was more necessary. Okay. Some other examples, right? If we take on a verb like rely, we always rely on something, or we rely on someone. And if we take out that prepositional phrase, on the kindness of strangers, we can see here that this doesn't even feel like a grammatically correct sentence. Do we ever just use the verb rely by itself? It doesn't seem like it. So with a verb like rely, it seems like we really need a prepositional phrase. We need to rely on something or someone. So that prepositional phrase seems necessary. Unlike in the garden, was less necessary for Granny seeing the gopher. Now, Jasmine gave her shoes to her sister. Here we have a ditransitive verb, right? Her shoes will be our direct object, right? To her sister, we've got the indirect object inside a prepositional phrase, right? If I remove that prepositional phrase, gave her shoes, again, this works. This is more grammatically correct than the first example with rely. I don't really feel comfortable using a sentence with the verb rely without relying on something or someone. I can use the verb gave, right, without an indirect object. We don't know who she gave the shoes to, but in this case, the meaning changes a little bit, right? When we use the verb give by itself, and we don't tell who you're giving the shoes to, then the meaning of the word give generally becomes a synonym for donate. It sounds like Jasmine donated her shoes. She gave her shoes to charity. She gave them to Goodwill or something, right? She gave them to some charity for kids who don't have shoes or something. Okay, so again, the meaning of the verb changes. And giving her shoes to her sister doesn't really have the meaning of making a donation. But when we removed that prepositional phrase to her sister, we changed the meaning of the verb give to now mean making a donation. So we're starting to see, I hope you can see that where we look at what parts of a sentence are necessary grammatically to maintain the same basic meaning, and then what other parts of a sentence we might be able to remove and not completely affect the core meaning of a sentence. Okay, Jess will enroll in an art class next semester. Jess enroll in the art class semester. If we take that modal will out, first of all, it's ungrammatical, right? We have a third person singular verb, Jess. So we would need to add an S to that verb enroll. Jess enrolls, or maybe make it past tense. Well, it can't be past tense, it's next semester, right? We need to do something, okay? Next semester is telling us future. I need that modal, right? So we can see that modal will really seems grammatically necessary in this sentence. We could put another modal like may, could, if Jess wasn't sure, or we could use a phrasal modal like is going to. But again, all of those modals are giving me a future meaning. So as soon as I said that this was next semester, I need some grammatical unit to express future time. There is no future form of a verb in English. We can't change the actual verb enroll like we do in present tense when we add an S, or in past tense when we add an ED. We have to use a modal, will or may, might, could, should, okay? We need some kind of modal there. So it seems like when in certain instances, like when we're talking about the future, modals are a necessary grammatical unit. So what is necessary, right, to make a sentence? We see right off the bat in the first example, the main verb. We need the main verb. If there's no main verb, you don't have a sentence. Okay. And then we're going to need all of those elements that we talked about in chapter 6, subjects, objects like your direct object or indirect object, your complements like your subject complement or object complement. Those are going to be necessary to maintain the core meaning of a sentence, right? And certain verbs, it depends on the verb, but the main verb will dictate whether or not you need a direct object or not, or you need an indirect object or not, right? And the main verb might dictate whether or not we need a subject or object complement, right? So certain verbs require certain other elements, right, based on the verb itself, okay? And then there are certain instances where a modal, like our example of the future, we need some kind of modal to express the meaning of future. And then there are certain prepositional phrases that might be necessary depending on the situation, okay? So these are going to be, the necessary elements, and then that means that, my logic dictates that there are unnecessary elements, what your textbook calls the extra stuff. And in chapter 7, we start our first foray into looking at the extra stuff. So chapter 7, we're talking about adverbials. Those are going to be elements in a sentence that add some kind of meaning, right? They're going to modify or describe the main verb, and they do give us information, but they are not necessary, grammatically necessary to maintain the core meaning of the sentence. Adverbials give us the extra information.